As the first hints of twilight bled into the foggy horizon over Harrow's Point, I ascended the worn iron steps of the lighthouse tower, the rhythmic crash of waves below sinking with my steady breaths, each laced with the briny tang of the sea, my constant companion. The air hung heavy with salt and mist, wrapping me like an old shroud, while distant gulls' calls cut through the gathering dusk, sharp against the tide's ceaseless murmur. In this solitary perch above the rocky cliffs, my days blurred into a familiar rhythm, polishing the great lenses until they gleamed like watchful eyes, logging the water's ebb and flow, and tracing wind shifts that carried secrets from the deep. Below, the town slumbered in quiet haze, a cluster of weathered cottages and fishing boats bobbing in the harbor, where mornings dawned thick with fog and the scent of fresh catch mingled with damp earth. I savored these isolated moments, my footsteps resounding in the spiral ascent, the beam's steady pulse, a silent guardian against the encroaching night that always lingered too close. But as I reached the top and flicked on the beacon's switch, a low rumble shook the tower, not from the sea, but the sky itself. The horizon didn't just darken. It twisted. Sheets of blackness unfurled like living shadow, swallowing the last glimmers of twilight. It wasn't a storm I'd ever seen. No lightning cracked, no thunder boomed. Instead, this darkness absorbed everything. The lighthouse beam dimmed to nothing, as if the light itself were being devoured. In that void, shapes emerged, elongated forms writhing and pulsing, not quite solid, but real enough to chill my bones. Eyes like shattered obsidian gleamed from the depths, watching, waiting. I stumbled back, my heart pounding against my ribs. What the hell was this? Not fog, not rain. The air thickened, oppressive, carrying murmurs that slithered into my ears. Gibberish at first, but laced with intent. I barricaded the tower's base door, shoving crates and my old desk against it, hands slick with sweat. Outside, entities pressed against the upper glass, their forms shifting like smoke-made flesh, tendrils probing the light's edges. This wasn't natural. It was an invasion from beyond reality's veil, drawn to Harrow's Point. I huddled in the lantern room all night, the beacon's motor whirring uselessly as darkness feasted on its glow. Sleep evaded me, replaced by gnawing dread. These things weren't leaving. Dawn came reluctantly, the blackness receding like a tide, leaving behind a sky bruised purple and gray. I ventured out, muscles aching from the vigil, the town below eerily silent. No gulls cried, no waves crashed with their usual fury. The streets were empty, cottages shuttered tight, fishing boats adrift in the harbor without their crews. Shadows lingered in alleyways, not the play of light, but something more. Coils of darkness that twitched when I looked away. I called out for Old Man Hargrove, the harbor master, but my voice returned hollow. In the town square I found traces, an overturned cart, a child's toy half buried in the mud, and faint scorch marks on the cobblestones where the entities might have touched down. Paranoia crept in. Were they watching from those lingering shadows? I hurried back to the lighthouse, locking myself in again, convinced that something was very wrong. The storms returned with a vengeance that evening, fiercer than before. Rain fell not as water, but as viscous strands that clung to the windows, blurring the line between liquid and shadow. The entities manifested boldly now, no longer hiding in the dark. I saw them through the glass, humanoid silhouettes with limbs that stretched unnaturally, faces that melted and reformed into grotesque masks. One pressed against the tower, its touch sending vibrations through the stone, and in that moment a compulsion hit me, an urge to open the door, to invite them in. It was like a voice in my head, not words, but an insistent pull, promising knowledge and power if only I'd summon them fully. I fought it, clenching my fists until my nails drew blood. But the temptation lingered, a murmur that grew louder with each passing hour. I couldn't ignore it. The next day, as the storms paused like a predator catching its breath, I delved into the old logs and books in the lighthouse's small library. Tomes on local legends, shipwrecks, and the strange phenomena that had plagued Harrow's Point for centuries. They spoke of the Void Callers, ancient fishermen who warned of darkness rising from the deep during unnatural tempests, entities that fed on light and life. But the stories were fragmented, mere warnings without solutions. Desperate, I sought out Dr. Miriam Vale, the reclusive scientist who'd moved to town years ago to tinker with atmospheric experiments in her cliffside lab. I banged on her door, the air still heavy with unnatural humidity. She let me in reluctantly, her eyes darting as if expecting company. "Cameron, you shouldn't be here," she muttered, leading me to a room cluttered with gauges and flickering screens. I demanded answers about the storms, the entities. She paced, avoiding my gaze. "It's not an invasion. Not exactly. Anomalies in the electromagnetic field, perhaps triggered by solar activity or something else." But her explanations rang hollow, only fueling my suspicion. She knew more, I could tell, but when I pressed, she ushered me out, locking the door behind me. As I walked away, I felt eyes on my back. Not hers, but something else's. Paranoia gripped me tighter. Was she one of them now? Or had she always been? That night, the urges intensified. I found myself sketching symbols on the tower walls, spirals and jagged lines matching the entity's forms, my hands moving without conscious thought. When I snapped out of it, the compulsion left me shaking and sweat-soaked. Outside, storms raged as entities slammed against the structure, their murmurs forming words in my mind. "Join us. Summon." I resisted, dousing the sketches with lamp oil and burning them, the smoke stinging my eyes. But doubt crept in. What if this was inevitable? Neighbors started vanishing then, or so it seemed. Mrs. Ellerby, who ran the bakery, was gone one morning, her shop door ajar, loaves scattered like offerings. Then Hargrove reappeared that afternoon, shambling down the dock with a vacant smile, his eyes glassy and movements jerky like a marionette on strings. "Cameron," he croaked, his voice not quite his own, layered with a murmuring undertone. "The light, it's calling them." I backed away, heart racing, as shadows coiled around his feet. He lunged faster than an old man should, his hands grasping like claws. I dodged, shoving him into the water, where he thrashed unnaturally before sinking, bubbles rising with faint, lingering laughter. Escapes like that became routine. I narrowly avoided an attack from the grocer who cornered me in an alley, his face twisting into something inhuman mid-conversation. "Why fight?" he hissed, tendrils of darkness seeping from his mouth. I swung a loose board, cracking it against his skull, and ran, the sound of pursuit fading only when I reached the lighthouse. Each encounter left me more isolated, the town a ghost of itself, puppets lurking in the fog. I barricaded better, rationing food from my stores, but the compulsive urges grew, invading my dreams. Visions of me standing atop the tower, arms raised, summoning a horde of entities to blanket the world. Research became my obsession during the lulls. I pored over more legends, uncovering patterns, similar events in isolated coastal towns, always linked to human meddling. Old mining operations disturbing ancient sites, or experiments like veils. I confronted her again, slipping into her lab during a brief calm. She was huddled over a console, screens displaying storm data that pulsed with unnatural rhythms. "You caused this," I accused, grabbing her arm. She whirled, eyes wild. "Not me. Us. The offshore drilling, the pollution. We've thinned the veil. They're not invading. We're inviting them." But before she could explain further, a shadow detached from the wall, engulfing her in a writhing mass. She screamed, her body convulsing as it puppeted her, turning her against me. I fled, her laughter, their laughter, chasing me into the night. My paranoia peaked. I trusted no one, not even my reflection, which sometimes seemed to lag a fraction behind. The storms fused into one relentless onslaught, isolating Harrow's Point. Roads washed away, the sea churned into a frothing barrier, and the entities roamed freely, their forms coalescing into hulking horrors that uprooted trees and shattered windows. I felt the pull stronger than ever, a siren call to summon them, to become one with them. Fighting it, I climbed to the lantern room and activated the beacon. Not the standard light, but an emergency overcharge I'd rigged years ago, amplified by mirrors and backup generators. The beam pierced the darkness like a defiant spear, and the entities recoiled, screeching in voices that rattled my teeth. But they surged back, tendrils wrapping the tower, climbing like vines of night. I fought them hand to hand, swinging a pry bar, feeling their icy touch sap my strength. One latched onto my arm, visions flooding my mind. The truth of the invasion, how our relentless probing of the deep, oil rigs, waste dumps, sonic blasts had cracked open gateways to their realm. humans had triggered it, weakening the barriers, and now they fed on our light, our lives, turning us into vessels. As the massive storm peaked, the lighthouse shuddering under the assault, I uncovered fragments of an old ritual in the logs, a potential way to seal the breach, using the beacon as a focus. But the entities closed in, their murmurs promising oblivion if I resisted, or godhood if I yielded. I activated the overcharge, the light blazing supernova, bright and pushing them back. But one broke through, its form coalescing into a mirror of myself, mocking my every move. The confrontation raged, my pry bar clashing against shadowy limbs, the truth burning in my mind. This was our doing, and now I had to end it. With a surge of desperate fury, I channeled the overcharged beacon's light through the ritual fragments I'd pieced together. A chant of ancient wards spoken into the blazing beam, my voice raw and defiant. The mirrored entity screamed, dissolving in a vortex of radiance that ripped through the horde, sealing the breach with a thunderous crack that resounded across the sea. The storm shattered, the entities unraveling like mist before the sun, their murmurs fading to silence as the tower stood firm. As dawn broke, the tempest subsided, revealing Harrow's Point in utter ruin. Cottages collapsed into splintered husks, the harbor choked with debris, and the few survivors wandering like vacant shells, their eyes glassy remnants of Hargrove's fate, puppets without strings. I couldn't stay. The air still thrummed with residual malice. Grabbing what supplies I could, I commandeered a weathered boat from the shattered dock and fled inland, the oars cutting through calmer waters as the rocky cliffs of my solitary perch receded into the haze. But as I rowed, subtle vibrations hummed throughout me, like shadow tendrils burrowing into my blood. Had I truly sealed them away, or merely delayed the inevitable? In the quiet hours that followed, as I drifted toward unfamiliar shores, I reflected on the horror we'd unleashed. Our meddling with the deep had thinned the veil, inviting these void callers not just to our town, but potentially anywhere, blurring the lines between legends I'd dismissed as fiction and the chilling reality now pulsing within me. Was I free, or had I become their unwitting vessel, carrying the seed of madness to new lands? The overcast skies hung like an old shroud, heavy with salt and mist, their persistent gray a sanity-shattering murmur that the encroaching night would always linger too close, waiting for twilight to bleed into the horizon. As the distant shores drew near, I felt the first faint stirrings in my mind, a chorus of murmurs, not silenced, but merely awaiting a new voice to carry their eternal hunger.
Hey guys, it's Malice here. I really appreciate you sticking around until the end of the story. I'm a one-man operation and trying my best to grow, so if you like what you just heard, please leave me a like. Subscribe if you want to hear more, and please send me any reading requests you might have. I'm always struggling to find new content. Thanks again, and stay scared.